Hi, hello everyone. Welcome to Science Friday's Mission Control Live. I am Sandy, the Science Friday Education Program Manager, joining you from Northwest New Jersey. Thank you so much for joining us today, no matter where you are. Speaking of which, I want to know, where are you joining us from today? If you are signed into YouTube, you can join us in the chat to the right side of your screen or below the video and let us know where you're watching from today. So go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat. If you don't know Science Friday, let me explain. Science Friday is your one-stop shop for reliable and relatable science news. We're really well known for our weekly science show, broadcast every week on, of course, Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. You can listen to us live each week on your local radio station or by following us at sciencefriday.com and clicking the listen banner that's right across the top of the page. But of course, we're so much more. When you visit our page, you'll see a variety of amazing articles, educational activities, and community experiences for those who love STEM. I'm really glad that you joined us today for Down to Earth with Mission Control Live. We'll be hosting these events every week. Next week is our last one, so be sure to join in. We're also sharing fun do-it-yourself design challenges on our website each week. So go to sciencefriday.com/down-to-earth and feel free to check it out while we're settling in. We've got great activities for you there, as well as recordings of our past sessions. Now, let's before we get started, I do have a couple of quick reminders. And hello from the Netherlands. So Science Friday is committed to providing a welcoming and harassment-free environment for members of all ethnicities, ages, genders, sexual orientations, physical abilities, national origin, beliefs, and any other dimension of diversity. And since we believe in providing clear expectations is a necessary part of building a respectful community, here are the basics for today. Be supportive and respectful when speaking with one another or asking questions in the chat. Share generously and listen closely. You can add your own thoughts whenever you want in the chat, even if they aren't strictly a question for our guest. Please do try to stay on topic. We're here to discuss this week's topic of science and space and other related topics. And we reserve the right to remove anyone who engages in demeaning, discriminatory, or harassing behavior today, though I suspect we've got a good crowd and we're not going to need to worry about that. All right, great. Thank you so much for sticking with me. Let's get to the good stuff and our guest for today's live stream. Emilie Lafleche is an analog astronaut and a PhD candidate in the planetary sciences at Purdue University. Her PhD research explores the impacts of extreme seasons on exoplanet habitability and life detection. As a commander on her first analog mission in October 2022, she ran 2 research projects, designing 3D printed tools for in situ planetary science research and growing crops in soils treated with meteorite powder to assess their bioremediative properties. And we're going to be asking all about this. She's passionate about STEM outreach and ethical exploration of our universe and making space accessible to all. So thank you so much for being here, Emilie. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about your fascinating career.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here. And today I want to give you a quick little overview of what it has been like for me to get into the place that I currently am. So I'm going to just go ahead and jump in. So I am currently doing my PhD, as Sandy just mentioned, but 10 years ago, I was just a 7th grade student, probably like a lot of you actually. And I first realized that I wanted to study exoplanets when I was reading a magazine article about this planet called Gliese 581G. And this planet was a planet that they thought was Earth-sized, and it was orbiting its star's habitable zone. So the habitable zone of a star is basically where you have the right conditions to have liquid water. So it's not too hot, not too cold, it's just right. It's also called the Goldilocks zone for that reason. So if you remember the tale of Goldilocks, it's very similar. And so the actual planet that they found was not orbiting our star. It was orbiting a star far, far away. And so that blew my mind. It was the first time I had ever heard of a planet orbiting another star. And they even thought that this one could have life on it because it was in its star's habitable zone, which was so, so cool to me. Now, of course, later on, they realized that this planet didn't actually exist. They had tried to measure some wobbles in the gravitational pull of the star. Long story. Basically, this planet was not real, but it still inspired me. And I thought it was so, so cool just to have a concept of a planet that might be Earth-sized and might, have life on it, just like ours. Then later on in ninth grade, I learned about extremophiles. And this was from my favorite science teacher, Miss Safie. She kind of showed us a video on YouTube after class one day. And she's like, did you guys know about water bears? Or tardigrades is the scientific name for them. And I thought they were so cute. They're little mittens and they're like little ripply little bodies. They're adorable. But what's cool about tardigrades or water bears is that they can survive in all kinds of extreme environments. That includes the hottest environments like hot springs and glaciers, the coldest environments, but also even the vacuum of outer space. So they don't even need to be on a planet to survive, which is crazy. And so when I learned about these two things, they really lit a fire inside me. And I was like, whoa, this is so, so cool. There's these planets orbiting stars that are not our own sun. And there's these little guys that can survive in these extreme conditions. So, I was asked a lot of the time by, adults in my life, like, what kind of career would let you study both exoplanets and life? That seems like two completely different things. And, there's so many things going on with that career choice. And I later found out that there is a career path that allows me to combine those two things, and that is becoming an astrobiologist. So an astrobiologist is somebody who studies life in the universe. And my specific research allows me to study life on exoplanets, which are planets that orbit stars other than our sun. So before I actually got to work on my PhD research, I first went to university to get my bachelor's degree. And so I went to McGill University in Montreal, Canada, and I studied planetary science, which led me to work on a ton of different research projects that were so cool and allowed me to really explore what type of research I wanted to do during my PhD. So I began with studying exoplanets and specifically this type of exoplanet research that allows us to map the surfaces of exoplanets in the light that they reflect off of their surfaces, which is really cool. It's in preparation for some future missions that NASA might send out in the next 20 years or so, which is awesome. The next research project that I did was about the moon. And so some of you may know that we're planning on heading back to the moon with the Artemis missions very, very soon. Some of them already happened, and the crewed mission is hopefully on its way very soon. And so my research project was actually coming up with a trajectory that humans could take to explore different parts of a certain landing site on the far side of the moon, so the side that we don't see. And so this was a very cool research project because it allowed us to come up with all kinds of mission concepts and talk about not only the rocks that we'd be able to collect, but also the safety of the crew and all the different, planning things that go into making a mission happen. So it was great. And then my final project was about Mars. So I got to study these clays that have little microbes, little bacteria in them. And we were trying to find out if we were to sample these clays from Mars, would we be able to see those bacteria inside the clays nicely preserved? And so I made the clays in the lab, and I was running a whole bunch of tests on them to see if we could actually do that, which was really fun. So those are my 3 research projects that I did while I was at McGill. And of course, now for my PhD, which I'm at Purdue University for, I now study the impacts of extreme seasons on whether or not exoplanets could host life and whether or not exoplanets could have life on them already. So that's a little different. So to have a habitable exoplanet, you just need it to potentially be able to host life. We don't know if there's actually life on it or not, but it has all the right stuff to be able to host life. Life detection, however, is different because we're trying to actually see if there's life on it right now. So we're trying to do different types of techniques and look for different types of data in order to do that. So I look at, how extreme seasons could affect that, which I'm sure we'll get into in the questions in a little bit. And I know Sandy also mentioned that I was an analog astronaut. And so just to quickly chat about that. So 2 years ago, actually to this month, it's crazy to say that, I was the commander of a lunar analog mission in this really cool analog site called Lunaris Research Station in Piła, Poland. And what a lunar analog mission is basically we go into this isolated environment where me and 4 other crew members were living, working, and doing research as if we were astronauts on the moon. So we were essentially running a whole bunch of different research projects. We were suiting up in our astronaut suits and going out and doing extravehicular activities, or EVAs for short. You can see an image over here in the left of me and one of my crewmates. We were doing some sampling processes in a lunar kind of simulator. And we had our fun little Leo rover accompanying us through the whole way. And we were storing some rock samples on his back. And then I also ran 2 different research projects myself while I was on that mission. The first one was 3D printing tools so that we can actually do planetary science research on the moon without bringing anything with us. So if we end up needing things on the moon, and we just can't have a rocket come and give us those things, and we forgot to take them with us for some reason, we can just print them there. And that makes it so much more convenient for astronauts to get what they need, especially when they're doing things in a hurry. And so I was able to design a really cool sample collection box and some little tubes, as you can see over there on Leo's back, and we were filling it with rocks to see how durable they were. And then I also decided to run a separate research project where we were trying to grow lettuce crops inside soil that was treated with meteorite powder. So meteorites have a lot of heavy metals in them, and we were trying to see if those lettuce crops could absorb some of those heavy metals inside them, leaving behind soil that would be able to be used for growing edible crops for humans in the future. So those are the 2 research projects that I did, and this was a very quick overview of the things that I do, but I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you so much, Emilie. Yeah, remember everybody, we want your questions. So at any time during this event, you have a question or a comment for the guest, put it right in the chat. I do see that folks really like the cute robots.
I love them too. I know, I miss Leo every single day. We made him all kinds of cute little like things to go on his back. He was our favorite. So yeah.
This may, could you explain what 3D printing is for folks? Because maybe not everybody has used that. And then tell us a little bit about how we use that for space travel and research.
Absolutely. So 3D printing is actually a pretty recent kind of engineering thing. So I actually learned about it while I was on my mission, which is pretty cool. So 3D printing is basically this concept where we are taking like some kind of plastic. There's different types of plastics for different types of uses, and melting it down with this kind of like sort of like nozzle, and it prints upward. So it kind of starts with a flat surface and then it builds things upwards. So you're actually getting a 3D object at the end. Whereas regular printing, when you send something to a printer, it just prints ink onto a page. So it's 2D. So 3D printing allows you to really make whatever you want, essentially, as long as it's able to be made with some kind of 3D printing filament, which is that plastic, or even, there's different materials that people have been using. There's even biomaterials that people have been using, which is a whole other thing. And I'm really interested in that too. But on my mission, we were basically trying to build these little sample collection boxes that are smaller than, the typical sample collection boxes that you would use for geology research on Earth, because we're in space and we might not have, enough space to contain all of our stuff if we're getting these massive bags and carrying them over our shoulders while wearing these big, big uniforms. And so we want it to be as convenient as possible. So we basically designed these things in Blender. So these boxes, Blender is a software that allows you to design 3D objects. And then we sent that file over to our lovely little 3D printer. And we had the 3D printer create the box. And so we were able to test out different designs and edit the designs and then really just make it all our own, which was awesome. And then we uploaded the files to the internet so that people could actually print the exact things that we made on our mission. So we're trying to make it as accessible as possible for everyone.
I'll have to get that link from you so we
Yeah,
can
of
share it
course.
with everybody. But I love the idea that you could have an artist or an engineer
Yeah.
design something and then like send it to the International Space Station. Is that like, could you do that?
Yeah, so not only can you actually do that, but there's actually been astronauts on the ISS who have successfully 3D printed things. And so they actually can do it while they're floating in space, which is so cool. Actually, those little tiny tubes that you saw us putting all the rocks into, those were actually based on a 3D printed file that was first designed, tested, and printed on the International Space Station. So we used their techniques to print our instruments. And it was really great to be able to do that because we were able to sort of double check to make sure the files were working and that we knew what we were doing, but also really feel connected to the astronauts on the ISS, which was such a great feeling.
That's amazing. I'm a big fan of 3D printing.
Oh,
We
yeah.
just got a great question from the audience, and it was actually the one that was on my mind. And it's the idea of the lettuce that it like slurps up the water with the heavy metals so that you can remove them more easily. Or why are we growing crops to absorb heavy metals? Can you
Yeah,
explain?
so this is a concept that a lot of agricultural people on Earth are doing right now, actually. So sometimes when soils get contaminated with these heavy metals, they can't obviously use that soil to grow edible crops because the heavy metals can essentially leach into the plants that they're growing in that soil. And it would be a bad idea for us to eat those heavy metals because obviously they're not great for us to eat. And so, yeah, basically the lettuce slurps up the heavy metals while it's taking up all of its nutrients from the soil. And lettuce, particularly, as well as other types of cabbage and spinach, are really, really good at taking up those heavier metals from the soil. And so, what a lot of farmers will do when their soils get contaminated is this thing called bioremediation, where they use plants that are really good at slurping up those, toxic things to plant that and then see how many of the heavy metals are absorbed by those plants, then take all those plants, throw them away, and then grow new crops on the soil now that it has been essentially leached of all of its heavy metals. So we were trying to see if we could do something similar with meteorite powder, which also has heavy metals inside it.
Gotcha. So you're using that kind of as a representation for the heavy metals you might find in space.
Exactly, yeah. So meteorites essentially are made of very similar things to some planetary surfaces. They're basically just rocks floating around in space, right? When they're hanging out in the environment, and planets are made of very similar types of rocks. And so essentially, if we're on a different planetary body and we're trying to grow crops to feed humans for long-term space missions, we might want to test the soil on those bodies to see if we could use it to grow food, and if we find heavy metals in that soil, then we might be able to use plants like lettuce to leach some of those heavy metals out of the soil before we grow edible food.
And when you say heavy metals, are you talking about things like lead? I mean,
Yeah,
or are these
so
like weird things that we don't know about from space?
yeah, so lead can be one of them. In our particular meteorite sample, there was iron and nickel. And so those two can be considered slightly heavy metals. It's not so much of an issue if we eat some iron, but nickel is definitely not something we want to eat. But there can also be like so many different types of heavy metals, things that we definitely don't want in our bodies. Lead is a great example of that. And so, yeah, those types of metals can be leached by different types of plants. And we basically just wanted to test it with meteorite powder as kind of an analog for planetary soil.
Now, you are an analog um, astronaut.
Yeah.
So explain what that is. Like, how do you become an analog astronaut? What does that mean?
Sure. Yeah. So actually, anyone can become an analog astronaut. Basically, what you need to do is go to an analog site, which is basically a site that has been designed or located or is located in a region that is similar to an environment we might find on another planet's surface, or even another, like a moon surface, for example. So there's a lot of different analog sites on Earth that we use to train and to practice basically how we would behave and how the crew dynamics would function if we were to travel to a different planet. This is really important when we're planning for these long-term space missions, like if we were to go to Mars, for example. We might not be able to come back to Earth in 2 days, right? We might actually stay there for several months at a time. And this would be quite a long time to be away from your family and also be living in the harsh conditions of outer space. And so essentially the idea of analog missions is that we get to practice these things before we go out into space so that we have the best preparation possible to make that mission a success. So my crew was doing a bunch of cool experiments, but we were also the experiments. They were testing our health, they were testing our sleep patterns, they were testing our psychological state, so our mental health, to see if we were doing okay while being separated from the outside world, and also having a really strict schedule that was meant to mimic what astronauts might have on space missions. So there's a lot that goes into analog missions. But yeah, if you are interested, there's space for everyone, I like to say, when it comes to analog missions. And we're really trying to use them to make space more accessible for people. So in the past, astronauts would have had to fit a very specific list of criteria. And that can be very limiting, and we might not get a very representative, group of people going up into space. And so now with the introduction of analog missions and the commercial space industry, we're making space so much more accessible to everyone, which is something I feel really passionate about. So
That is so great. And, that actually brings us to kind of a perfect place. Since we are, gosh, time is going so fast. I want to introduce Kathy Cesari, who is our educator for this week. Kathy is the author of over a dozen books for kids featuring hands-on STEAM activities. She also teaches enrichment workshops at schools, museums, libraries, and after-school programs, and works with educators and parents looking for ways to make learning more engaging and fun. And she has a really exciting challenge for everybody because, as you said, there's space for everyone. So we want to inspire our young learners to be designers and to use space as a jumping off point. So Kathy, why don't you tell us a little about what you do and what you've created for us this week?
So I take cool projects, and especially things that are inspired by real life. So in this case, the project was inspired by the fact that on the International Space Station, they have to recycle all their resources, and in particular water. So in the past, they used to ship fresh water up, and I guess they just disposed of it when they were done, and now they try to recycle it all. So what the project that I'm doing today that you are going to get to do is taking everyday materials, which is what I always try to work with, and making a water filter so you can see the process of how would you remove contaminants from water, make it drinkable again. And the idea of growing lettuce to take contaminants out of the soil is a whole other idea that I didn't know about, but I'm making notes for the future. And there were so many side ideas that came up, and I did work some of them into this project, but there's a million more that you could pursue. Should I go ahead and show the project? Okay. So let me get that going.
Yeah, now I want to work with Emily to get a whole project on bioremediation for our crew.
And I'm hoping this will open.
All right.
I'm not getting the button yet. Sandy, do you want to see if you can share it?
Sure. Is okay. Yeah. Give me one moment. And seems like we're having a little bit of a technical issue. My apologies, folks. We will get this going for you. Here we go. All right.
There we are. Okay. So if you scroll down, you'll see that I actually brought up the idea of using lettuce to explain how would you remove water from something. So for instance, if you took a shower on the space station, how do they recapture that water? How do they get the water separated from whatever washed off of you, I guess? So the idea was, you would rinse out some water, rinse out some lettuce in a colander, but you could also spin it in a salad spinner
Or
and remove the water that way. And if you didn't have a salad spinner, you could just put it in a plastic bag and spin it around, which was kind of a cool idea. And I'm sorry, if you could just scroll back up there. There are some really cool videos from Chris Hadfield, I could just watch his videos all day. He just did so many cool little demonstrations on the International Space Station, and there's a ton of videos from astronauts doing demonstrations. So that's definitely something to check out. But if you want to go ahead to where the project is, and I can just give a quick run through. So this is apparently a very popular project. It just involves taking a plastic bottle, cutting it in half, and you take the part with the spout, turn it around, and set it into the bottom of the bottle, and that makes it into a funnel. And if you cover it up, you can put some kind of filtering material in the top and pour your dirty water, which I just mix mine with some garden soil, and just pour it right through that material and let it drip through and see how much of the contaminants it removes. Yeah, here we are cutting it up in half and putting some, I just used some gauze because I saw that recommended somewhere. You could use anything that would allow water to drip through. Um, you could use coffee filters. I didn't want to use coffee filters because I didn't want something that was going to remove too much. I wanted to see how much the material we put in was actually removing and not just the coffee filter. Um, I don't know if you can go back to another picture of the materials that I use, but I just used what was, lying around in my cabinet. So it's like cotton balls and some aquarium gravel. And I had an old jar full of um, uh, soup grains. Barley. It was barley that I had never made the soup, so I used that. I was looking for sand because sand is actually used in real water filters, and I couldn't find any like playground sand, but I had some colored sand for making art, so I made a nice layered thing full of sand. And then the last one, I tried layering a bunch of them. And there's no water there because it actually took like 2 days for the water to drip through. And by the time I found it, because the bulgur wheat, it was starting to get a little moldy. I think I had kind of made bulgur soup um, accidentally. So you might want to keep more of an eye on your project if you're letting it sit overnight than I did. But it was a lot of fun just to find things and see how it would work, and it, even things that you wouldn't think would work, you could see the difference between how dark it was at the beginning and then how much was removed just from crazy things like cotton balls. So um, and I did end up with some very clean water at the end too, so it was kind of interesting.
that is really interesting. So, folks, you can get all of this on sciencefriday.com/down to earth. All of the activities we've done so far are there. All of our sessions are there. So why don't we bring Emilie back on? Last questions, activated charcoal. Yes, that is, there's a discussion about activated charcoal in the resource. Go check that out. Gosh, I cannot believe the time went so fast. Thank you, Emilie, for being here and sharing all the interesting information about your career and what you do. Thank you, Kathy, for sharing your really exciting activity that is so easy that anyone can do with just stuff from around the house. I can't wait to see what you all do. Please share your solutions and your design challenges in our community lab. If you didn't get to ask a question today, you can also go to our community lab and share your questions there, and I will reach out to Emilie and get you answers, I promise. And that is a free and safe space for kids and family. So make sure you visit Down to Earth, get involved, try the activities. Let me just give you each a chance to say goodbye and maybe one last thing that you'd like to share with our learners. Emilie, why don't you go first?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun. And I hope everyone listening today feels like they can, be interested in multiple things at once. I know my career is a little unorthodox. I'm doing so many different things that seem unrelated, but to me, they're all related. And I think that that's a testament to being able to really just like what you like and carve out your own career path. Don't be afraid to be unique, and really just take all of the inspiration you do from your teachers and, you know, your friends, and make your life what you want it to be.
I love that. And Kathy, what would you like to end
Yeah,
with?
so it's really inspiring to hear Emilie's career. And Sandy, you're always inspiring whenever we get to do stuff together. But yeah, just the idea that you can take an idea from the space station and test it in your kitchen, I think. You really learn real stuff. It's not like just playing around. So, you know, you can do science and learn real science at home.
Absolutely. And I hope that our young innovators will take these ideas and improve their community, improve our planet, and who knows, maybe get off planet and do some amazing things out there in the universe too. All right, everyone, thank you again for being here. We'll see you next week for another one with Dr. Julia Badger, who has designed robots for the International Space Station. Take care. Have a great weekend. Have a great Friday. Thank you, everybody, for being here.